So we're discussing dealing with snow and ice on Shabbos, and
we lost your voice and your video.
That
I'm assuming he has some kind of bandwidth problem in the show.
sidewalk, and you can't move it more than 4 amos, but you could sort of pave a way with your hands or feet. And we also said that if it's a place where it's possible, if it's in such a place where it's possible for you to do it, but if in a mutter in a permissible way, so then you could hire a guy to do it. Even if the guy may do it in he may do it by you moving it more than 4 amos, so then that's not your concern because he could do it in a permissible way. Of course, you're going to have the question. You're going to have the question of if the guy is bringing his, if he's bringing his shovel on his truck, but maybe he could do it with his hands. Again, in a place, if you're in a place where there's the eruv, it's basically it's pretty straight, pretty simple to permit both for you to do it yourself and on Shabbos and to have a guy do it for you. Now, you wouldn't necessarily be able to hire the guy on Shabbos. In fact, you're not allowed to hire the guy on Shabbos, but you could hire him before Shabbos to do that, because you're not asking him to do anything forbidden. Okay, now the second question that we asked on the, we had that list of 3 questions. The second question was, my business hires a company, a snow removal company, to plow to clear the parking lot. So do we have to tell them not to do it on Shabbos? Now, the reason why I worded it that way is because when you're talking about a parking lot, there's 2 differences over here. One difference is that whereas in a sidewalk, people have to walk up and down the street, so it could be dangerous. So there's much more of a concern, much more of a reason to allow shoveling and salting the ice, versus in a parking lot where presumably if you're sharing Shabbos, at least in many cases, the parking lot would not be used on Shabbos. So there's not sort of a danger or a safety concern. But perhaps more important is that whereas the little stretch of sidewalk outside your house, it's a reasonable possibility that it can be done without a machine, so you could just use a shovel. When it comes to a parking lot, it must be done with a plow. It's impossible to do such a big thing, such a big area by hand. I mean, impossible. It's not considered reasonable. So now he's already using a plow and a tractor or whatever it is. Now you're getting into much more serious Shabbos prohibitions. Now I should just clarify that even if it's just your sidewalk, even though we could argue, strictly speaking, that it's permissible for him to clear your sidewalk with a plow, it certainly seems that poskim are uncomfortable with that. In other words, even though you could say, look, he could do it in a permissible way, so it's not my concern if he's using a plow. A plow might be, if he comes with a shovel, so the fact that he brought his shovel on the truck, that doesn't matter so much. But if you're actually using a plow, an electric or a gas-operated machine on your property in public on Shabbos, again, even if strictly speaking it can be allowed, it's certainly not within the spirit of Shabbos and ideally should be avoided. But here, we're talking about where you're actually asking him to do something forbidden. You're asking him to come with his truck and clear your parking lot. So do you have to tell him not to do it on Shabbos? So it's interesting that I have here 2 articles written on this topic. One is from Rabbi Henoch Ashkenazi from Kriyas, that's in Monroe, New York, and another one from Rabbi Shimon Elazar Tovah from Monsey, New York. So kind of similar neighborhoods, actually similar terrain also in both of those places, both sort of countryside-ish with very big hilly areas, etc. And the funny thing is that they both more or less say the same thing when it comes to the details of the arguments. But like one of them, Rabbi Ashkenazi, is emphasizing how pretty much everything is permissible, and everything can be found a workaround, versus Rabbi Tovah, who's very like his no, it's forbidden, forbidden, forbidden. But then when you read through his article, you see that there's a lot of things which he is giving allowance for. So when first of all, I want to look at, I'm going to read, I didn't make the copies for this, but I'm going to just show you an important piece. Because in Shulchan Aruch, because we already alluded to this before, but sort of a little bit more elaborate. We spoke before about that if there's a permissible way to do it, if there's a permissible way to do something, so then you are allowed to ask a goy to do it for you, even though he might choose to do it in a forbidden way. Now, the truth is that is not a complete, clear-cut heter. It may be, if it comes to muktzah, carrying, we would be more lenient about it versus driving a truck. And again, there's much more leaning towards allowing it when it comes to your sidewalk, which is dangerous and people can hurt themselves, versus your parking lot. But I just want to read to you a very interesting piece in the Shulchan Aruch over here. Just a moment. So in the Alter Rebbe, it's in Siman Reish Ayin Vav, chapter 276, and I'm going to read it to you from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, where it is. I think in the big Shulchan Aruch it's Sif Hey. In the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it's where is it? Number 9. He says there are, however, authorities who permit telling a non-Jew to bring a burning light, a burning candle, for him from another place. The rationale is that carrying a burning lamp is forbidden only because it is muktzah, as will be explained in section 279. Any article of muktzah is permitted to be carried in an irregular manner, so as will be explained in 311. Since the Jew could have brought the lamp himself in an irregular manner using the back of his hands or his elbow or the like, therefore, it is if a non-Jew brings it in an ordinary manner, there is no prohibition involved, for it is only forbidden for a non-Jew to perform in Shabbos such activities that the Jew is forbidden to perform himself. So what he's saying is that you're allowed to ask a guy to bring a candle, a lit candle from the other room. Why? Because what would be the prohibition for me to bring the candle from the other room? Only muktzah. Now, muktzah, you are allowed. The halach is you're allowed to move muktzah kalachayad. If this, imagine this is something muktzah, I could pick it up like this with the back of my hands, or in some other irregular manner, I move it. So, I could do the same with a candle. Now, it's difficult to do that with a candle because you have to make sure the candle doesn't get extinguished. You don't want the wax dripping on your clothing, etc. But it is theoretically possible to move a candle kalachayad, and therefore I could ask the guy to bring me the candle because I'm not asking him to do something forbidden. Bringing the candle isn't in and of itself forbidden. The fact that he chooses to carry it in a regular manner and not with the back of his elbow, that's his choice. Now, then the Alter Rebbe concludes, nevertheless, this lenient ruling should be imparted only to a learned person, but not to unlearned people, lest they become accustomed to instructing a non-Jew to perform forbidden tasks on Shabbos, making unfounded comparisons based on their own logic, permitting themselves even greater leniencies than allowed by law. Okay, so this is one of those cases in Shulchan Aruch where it tells you that something is permissible, but don't tell anybody this unless they're very learned people or others that you have halacha ve'emerin. Now, can I ask a guy to do X, Y, Z on Shabbos? Even in some cases, even though the answer might be yes, well, I'm going to try and veer to a no, because you don't want that person to then extrapolate to allowances in other cases, which could have subtle differences that appear subtle but are actually very significant halachically. So how exactly to apply that becomes questionable, and every Rav has to sort of balance it himself. And that's one of the differences between these two articles, is that the one that's more strict, he's like, right away, well, I don't really want to use this heter because most people don't qualify as Bnei Torah, and therefore most people, so we shouldn't be going with this allowance. On the other hand, you could say, look, again, like you said, if it's talking about a place where, especially in a place with a lot of hills, if it gets icy, it could be very dangerous. So we really want to find a heter. So then you might be more motivated. Again, this comes down to the Rav's shikul hadas, to the Rav's how he assesses the situation. And again, it's not necessarily so objective. Now, of course, again, 1 second, and a big part of it also depends on, well, how practical or how reasonable would it be to do this in a permissible way? So like we said last week, to clear the sidewalk in front of my house in a permissible way, especially in a place where there's an Eruv, is pretty easy, right? But if you're talking about clearing a parking lot, or, for example, perhaps in a place like Muncie where people have much bigger properties and it's much more, maybe there it's really not so reasonable to say that you could do it in a permissible way. So that's what I'm saying. A big part of this shiloh of dealing with snow, besides depending on whether or not there's an eruv in the given location, also depends on another aspect that it could depend on is, well, how big of a deal is it, and how reasonable or theoretical is it to expect that the goy would be able to do this by hand with a shovel in a permissible way? Yes.
So are you saying that you can't use I can't say to the person, I need this clean, period, and then let it up to
very good. Very good. Well, again, if it's a place where they could do it, again, like it's your sidewalk, then there's definitely strong room to say so. But if it's your parking lot, then not.
Okay.
Right? And again, like I said before, usually in a parking lot, it depends on the nature of the business. But if it's is the business open on Shabbos? Do you have people, again, having businesses open on Shabbos is another topic. But right. If it's not a place that's open on Shabbos, and there's no danger because the guy can come on Sunday and do it, and there's not people who are not going to get hurt. What?
Let's say the shul.
Oh. Yeah, so that's the question: what to do. Now, now there's two other topics that have to be addressed over here, which kind of overlap. One is Amir al-Nachri, which we've been discussing last week, telling a guy to do something forbidden on Shabbos, and basically, as we saw last week, there's two ways to do this. Generally speaking, one is called Schir Yoim and one is called Kablanus. Schir Yoim means when I tell the guy, I want you to do this for me right now. And Kablanus means that he's a contractor to get a job done. Obviously, within contractor, there could be all different, the many different variations of exactly what the agreement is and how the contract is set up, which could have halachic ramifications. But let's just talk for argument's sake that you have a contract with him. I pay you X amount of money a month, and anytime it snows, you take care of it. So in such a case, there is no Amir al-Nachli, strictly speaking. Because I haven't told him to do anything on Shabbos, right? And even when he does do it on Shabbos, he's doing it for himself, because that's how Kablanus works. Okay, we discussed that last week. We're not going to get into all of that again. But here, but first of all, even in case of Kablanus, it's still forbidden because of chashash, of maris ayin. There's still a concern that people who are observing him doing work for me would think that I'm doing it in a forbidden way, that I don't have a proper contract set up in a way that's allowed to do on Shabbos. So therefore, generally speaking, that would give me a blanket no, because even if technically it's permissible, it's still going to be forbidden, because somebody is seeing the guy clear my snow might think that I did it in a forbidden way. Now, the one caveat to that is if it's chutz l'tchum, if it's outside the city limits, outside the area where Jews are, so then it's not a problem. So, for example, if I own an assisted living place in outside, outside the Jewish neighborhood, So if I set up the snow cleaning room, the snow removal in a permissible way in kablonos, and the only chashash is marasayin, what chashash, the only concern is that people are going to think I'm doing it in a forbidden way. So then if your business is located in a place where it's outside the tchum of the Jewish community, then that is not a problem. So that's kind of clear cut. Yeah, if a person question, can I have a company clear my snow in my parking lot? Well, if your parking lot is outside of the tchum, then it would be permissible. Now, but then, even in that case, or in all cases, one second, I'm just running around here a bit. Then you have the issue of, well, can I say that because nisparsim b'derech heter, because that it's common for people to do it in a permissible way, so that removes the chashash of marasayna, and they could do it even within the tchum, because everybody knows that people have a contract. So then I could do it even within the tchum. So that seems to be largely hinged on the question of kaveh melachta b'Shabbos. Now, the topics of schiras and kablanos, I'm doing things for you on Shabbos, and kaveh melachta b'Shabbos are from the very complicated and multifaceted aspects of Hilchos Shabbos, and there's many svarim just on those things. So obviously we're not going to be able to do it just to do the whole topic justice. But basically what Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos means is that even within kablanos, even if I have a contract for the guy to do something for me, remove the snow whenever it snows, if there's an explicit expectation that part of the work has to be done on Shabbos, then that's a problem, right? He brings, sorry?
If it's not in the Jewish community.
It doesn't matter if it's in the Jewish community or not. It's Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos. You're not allowed to be Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos, and there's different opinions as to why that's a problem.
How do you pick up
The contract.
contract? Yeah,
Yes, even if it's with a contractor, if it's Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos, it's forbidden. And there's different shittas why it's forbidden. And in the Pasuk, there's a number of different options of what Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos. Just for example, let's say an example. If I ask a guy, go buy me a car, yeah, and I'll pay you money. I'll pay you $1,000 for getting. I don't want to have the hassle of dealing with it. You go buy me the car and thing. Now let's say the car dealership is only open on Shabbos, right? Now I'm not asking him to. I don't care if he buys me the car on Tuesday. It just so happens that the car dry cleaner on Thursday, and I'm picking it up on, they say I'll be ready Monday. That's no problem. Now, it's very possible that he's going to clean my suit on Shabbos. That's not my concern. I'm telling you, you can do it by Monday. That's fine. It's no problem, right? But if I'm giving it to him on Friday afternoon and I want 24-hour service and I'm picking it up tomorrow night, so even though theoretically, but there's no time. Theoretically, I don't care if he doesn't do it on Shabbos, but you do because there's no time for him to do it not on Shabbos if you need to be ready by tomorrow night. Another very practical ramification of this in the age of online shopping is, and this is not just Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos. This borders on other questions of Amir L'Nachri as well, but it's practical, so we'll mention it. We've discussed it before. You order something, say from Amazon, delivery by Saturday, So it depends. Here there's a lot of things. For example, if I order something on Wednesday from Amazon and it says delivery by Saturday, it's very possible and often even likely that it will come before Shabbos. So you're not saying delivery on Shabbos. You're saying delivery by Shabbos. It might come on Shabbos. It might come on Friday or Thursday. So that should be fine. But if I'm delivering it on Friday, if I'm ordering it on Friday and it's express delivery by 11 a.m. tomorrow, then that's called Kaveh Melachta B'Shabbos. Now, depending on the season of the year, for example, sometimes it might say delivery by Saturday 10 p.m. So then they could deliver it after Shabbos, and especially in the Marshall here, you're not even asking them to do it. If they say delivery by 10 p.m. and Shabbos goes out at 6 o'clock, it might be in the warehouse right here on Howard Street, and they're not gonna do anything for you on Shabbos for all it's possible then for them to not do anything for you on Shabbos. Anyway, but basically, right, there's other scenarios also of Kivei Melachta B'Shabbos. Kivei Melachta B'Shabbos is again, like I said, it's a complicated subject. Now, there's different shittas in it, but we're going to focus here on the shittas of the Shulchan of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. According to the Alter Rebbe, the argument here is made that. One second. That as long as you, there was one piece of Alter Rebbe that I wanted to read inside. Just a moment, let me find it. Here we go. There we go. So this is from Siman Mem Dalet, 244. It's the third chapter of Hilchos Shabbos, and in the Alter Rebbe, it's in Sif Yud. And then we have again later in Sif Chof, I think, so it talks about the six. Yeah. So let me read to you two sifrim here from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. It says, when is this license granted? That it's okay to have a guy do something for you if it's a contract. When the Jewish employer does not at all object if the scribe, in that case, remains idle after he commands him to perform the task, but leaves the option to perform it whenever he desires. In such an instance, when he's working on Shabbos, he's working on his own initiative, and not because of his own Jewish employer. If, however, the Jewish employer objects to his remaining idle, then when the scribe works on Shabbos, he is working because of the Jewish employer. Therefore, the Jewish employer must instruct him not to perform the task on Shabbos. If, however, the non-Jewish worker does so regardless, he need not admonish him because the non-Jew is acting out of his own initiative. So again, here we have a problem that if I want him to do it on Shabbos, if I'm makbid, the Alter Rebbe holds that's a problem. But as soon as I've let him know that I'm not makbid, then even if he does it, it's not my concern. Again, there's three concerns that we're addressing over here. There's kablanus, there's amir l'nochri, instructing a guy to do something for you on Shabbos, which we've said that if it's done in a way of kablanus, that he's a contractor, that's not a problem. Then you have the problem of chashad, that people are going to think you're doing it in a forbidden way. In other words, people are going to not think that you're doing it without a contract, but rather that you're doing it in a way of schir yoim. And there we have, at least in certain cases, somewhat of an allowance that if it's common for people to do it in a permissible way, like it's common in Chicago for people to have a contractor remove their snow, so then that could be room for leniencies, at least in certain situations. And again, when there's a strong need, we're going to try to push for that, right? But we have here the third problem of kivei melachta b'Shabbos. And for that, all I need to do is tell him that I don't mind if you don't do it on Shabbos, or I don't want you to do it on Shabbos. And then whether contractor. But is it common for people to do it with a contractor, but to tell him not to do it on Shabbos? I don't know. It could be it's common here in Chicago, West Rogers Park. Certainly the guy who does our snow, who does it for a lot of the local shuls, so does that create a problem of Marasayim? So that's that basically boils down to where these two articles which I described here seem to differ from each other. Is that's certainly one of the points of, well, do we have to be concerned about that? Yes.
So what happens if you have a contractor and you're doing it right, and then the contractor goes to you and says, "Can I come on Saturday to do this?" Well, how do you answer him? Because I had that one time.
Well, again, in order to avoid kivei melachta b'Shabbos, you just say, way. There's another way to do it, which he comes up with. It's an interesting way, which is very interesting. He says, one second, let me find it. He says like this: you could even have a contract which guarantee. He says, according to Alter Rebbe, different poskim here. He argues that according to Alter Rebbe, this would work. He says, if you put in your contract, and this would sort of get you the best of both worlds. He says, if you put into the contract that I don't care when you clear the snow, just the sooner you clear the snow, the more you get paid. So then I'm not Shabbos because I don't mind if he comes on Sunday to clear the snow. But at the same time, I'm pretty guaranteed that he is going to come on Shabbos, which I might prefer, because if he doesn't come till Sunday, then he's going to get paid less money. If I word the contract that depending on how soon after the snowfall, exactly how you would word it, yeah, that's how much he's going to get paid. So on the one hand, I've warned that I'm not Kaveh Menachem Shabbos because I've told him explicitly I don't care when you come. And at the same time, he's motivated to do it as fast as possible because he's going to get paid more if he does that. And Rabbi, this is Rabbi, what's his name, Rabbi Ashkenazi, is arguing that would be totally fine according to Alter Rebbe. The interesting thing about these articles is that they're going through all the different opinions and they want to stride both. But for us, if we're following the psakim of the Alter Rebbe, then that's fine.
Except doing it that way could be more expensive.
It could be more expensive. And again, I'm still not comfortable with the whole Maris Ayin thing. The bottom line is that to have somebody come with mamash, with a machine, with a tractor or a snowblower on Shabbos, if it's inside the tchum, it's always going to be very. It's never going to be clear cut. Yes, you can do that. I mean, very unlikely for that to be clear cut. Yes. In fact, I was talking to Rabbi Markowitz this week, and he told me that they one time had a very icy, snowy thing on Shabbos, and Danny over there by Bnei Reuven was busy out. One of the other guys was busy there with the snow blower. Rabbi Hertz told him to stop. It was happy for him to shovel it. It was happy for him to put salt, like we'll talk soon. But he didn't want him to use the snow blower in front of Bnei Reuven on Shabbos. Because that's another thing which they all talk about, that even if all these things of Amir Lanachri become permissible, it's disrespectful to Shabbos. It's lived in the chayils, illicit the Shabbos, whatever you want to call it. And again, usually that's not the emergent. And you're going to have the issue of Zelusa, of sort of not being respectful to Shabbos.
Rabbi, did you give any thought to my question about the art show where I?
Yes, it's way beyond the scope of what we can just. I sent you a message about it. Did you see that?
No.
Check your WhatsApp.
Okay.
1 second. Yeah, so here this is the whole. I think he has here this whole thing about where he builds the heter to tell him that I'll pay you more. That's okay. Let's skip that for now. All right. So basically, again, let's summarize where we're up to. Can you shovel the snow on Shabbos in your sidewalk yourself or with a guy? Assuming that you're living in a place where there's an eruv, then that's not a problem at all. Can you have a guy do it with a snowblower? If it's in the tchum in a place where there's Jews, there's various ways to be mitzaref a kula, but usually we would be reluctant to rely on such a kula. If it's outside of the tchum and it's with a type of contract that's clear that you're not explicitly telling him to do it on Shabbos, then that would be permissible. And then finally, we have the question of salt. Now, again, the biggest problem with salt is going to be the issue of carrying. And if you're in a place without an eruv, or if you don't use the eruv, I personally would have put out salt yesterday had I used the eruv, but I don't, and I wasn't going to go track some, whatever. It was very slippery outside my house. But if you use the eruv, then there's no reason not to put the salt on Shabbos. But
if you have a guy do it, then what's the issue about it?
I didn't have a guy to do it.
Okay, so you're saying if you do it yourself, or if you get it.
Yeah, no. If I had a guy to ask, I would have asked the guy to do it. I just didn't have. Yeah. Now, okay. So what's the main? It's interesting when they talk about salt. So there's different shuvas. So one of the shilas they talk about is muktzah, the salt is muktzah. Now it's interesting. This is the shuva from Machzor Eliyahu, from Rabbi Eliyahu Falk from Gateshead. And the last piece of this shuva, he talks about whether the salt is muktzah. Oh, I skipped. There's another whole chapter over here which I didn't even notice. Okay, he talks here about using an axe to dust. Okay. But he talks about salt that's used for salting meat, like kosher salt. Now, I've never seen anybody use kosher salt for melting ice, and I don't even know if it would work. I don't know if he was just ignorant of the Metzias. Don't forget, he's living in England where you don't have snow nearly like you have here. I mean, he lived in Gateshead. Gateshead is in the north of England where there is snow there, and it does get icy, but not like here. And it could be for the little bit of ice that they have there, the kosher salt would be enough. So I don't know. I just don't know the science of it, how kosher salt. So he gets into this whole discussion. Well, if it's salt that's designated for koshering meat, which is not a permissible activity on Shabbos, so is the salt muktzah. But if it's salt like we have over here, that salt that I forget what it's called exactly, but it's salt that's made for melting the ice. So that's what its designated purpose is. So if we establish that melting the ice is a permissible Shabbos activity, and that's what the salt is designated for, so then the salt is not muktzah. Now, the relevant halacha about melting stuff on Shabbos is on the sheets in front of you, and it's from Simon, from chapter 318, number 27. 318, and this I might be able to pull up on the screen just a second. There you go. Let me share the screen. Share. Okay. There are, however, other authorities who differ with the above and maintain that there's no prohibition in causing congealed fat to melt by placing it in a warm place. With regards to hail, these authorities maintain that our sages only forbade crushing it by hand, but they did not institute any safeguard with regard to instances where it melts on its own accord. Therefore, it is permissible to warm this bread that is filled with fat, even in a place where a hand would recoil when touching it. Okay, so here we're talking about you have basically like a pastry filled with some sort of congealed something or other, and you want to warm it up on Shabbos, which would cause the congealed whatever it is gravy to become liquid. So obviously there's the question of bishul, which is the context. This is chapter 318. We're talking about bishul, but also I think we are. 1 second. No. Yeah, I think it is talking about bishul. Anyway, but then he continued, but there's also the issue here of melting. Are you allowed to melt the thing? So he says the rationale is that the prohibition against cooking applies neither to bread. 1 second. I'm sorry. Is this the wrong sheet? Hold on. Sorry. Oh yeah, this is the right thing. Yeah. The emphasis over here is that ignoring the issue of bishul, according to this opinion, he's saying that there's no issue to melt. There's no issue with melting the congealed fat, and this opinion holds that the prohibition of melting ice or snow is only if you crush it by hand. If you take the snow or the ice and you physically crush it to melt it, that would be forbidden. But just doing an activity which causes it to melt, in this case putting it in a warm place, that would be permissible. And so, the primary halacha, like we see over here, follows that opinion. And therefore, that's basically what the poskim boil it down to, is that putting ice on the salt. I mean, you're allowed to take an ice cube on Shabbos and put it into water because you're not melting it directly. And also another factor over there is that it's melting into other liquid. so it's not recognizable. So here also, first of all, you're not directly melting the ice, you're putting the salt in it. And even once a little bit of ice melts, it's all melting into each other, so it's not sort of directly so obvious. So that's basically the maskana of all the poskim about putting salt on Shabbos. And here you look in Shmir Shabbos Kalachi, he says explicitly it's permissible to put salt on Shabbos. The kids are all the poskim who talk about it, they discuss muktzah, they discuss baina, they discuss all sorts of things. But the bottom line is, from what I've seen, I haven't seen a single person who says that there's any problem in putting salt on Shabbos. Again, not muktzah, not any of the other things. Like I said, besides the issue of carrying on Shabbos, which if you use the Erev, or you have somebody who uses the Erev, should be fine.
So then the issue is only carrying that you're talking about as far as Shabbos goes.
Yeah.
What if you stood at your front door and threw it on the sidewalk?
Well, you also you're going to be, first of all, you carry, if it's in your house, out to the front of your house is carrying from a private domain to a public domain. And even within the public domain, if it's more than 4 amos for the more than 6 feet, it's also a problem.
Throwing it?
Yeah, throwing, carrying, anything is from an, if you don't use the Erev, yeah.
Okay. And what happens if, like, we have a box of salt at our front door and our back door? It's not a question of carrying it through from a public domain, from a private domain.
Or if it's your back door, you have an enclosed backyard, the front door is still a problem.
Correct, right. But what I'm getting at is that if I had a container of salt outside, would that give me an extra 4 almonds that I could throw it at?
I mean, depend if it's on your porch and there's a fence around your porch, it depends on all those variables.
Okay.
All right, I guess you'll forgive me for finishing a little bit early today.
I have a quick question as a follow-up to last night's discussion.